If something can be typically strange, but at the same time utterly expected, that's become what the Steelers-Ravens rivalry is. Always weird twists, always funky ways to get to an end and get to a final score, but usually some of the same themes along the way, and that's what happened yesterday. The Steelers won. Now they've won 6 of 7 against the Ravens, but boy, it was weird getting there. And I don't know how much better people truly feel about the overall state of the Steelers heading into their bye week. We're going to try to figure that out right now on Madden and Benz, Unfiltered, Tim Benz, and Mark Madden. Mark from 105.9 The X, and here at Trib Live. You can read them 4 times a week. Listen to them 3 to 6 on 105.9 The X, and read me at Breakfast with Benz. Mark, Steelers wins 17-10. Pretty conventional score, but a non-conventional route to get there. And it's a non-conventional way the Steelers tend to win, but it's become their practice. Get a huge play or two from defense. Hope you get one big play on offense, maybe something from special teams, and just cross your fingers.
Well, I think they just got lucky. I think that's the most basic but accurate description of what happened yesterday. The Ravens dropped 7 balls, I think, 3 touchdowns, I think. The one guy just fell down when he was going to score a touchdown. They did execute that long pass to Pickens, full credit. I'm being told now that Pickett changed the play at the line because we have to distance any success whatsoever from Matt Canada. Pickett might have changed the protection from what I've legitimately heard, but not to play. But they won. And I keep getting told, hey, a win's a win. It's a division win. They're 2-0 in the division. They're in first place in the AFC North. And great. You want to be happy about that? You want to pound your chest? Terrific. But their point differential is minus 31, despite being 3-2. Tim, that's Eric Carlson in San Jose territory. I think that's more indicative of where the team's at. Maybe not that bad, but certainly not as good as 3-2 and leading the division. Although, if you want to say the standings don't lie, they never do. They won't at season's end either.
The standings don't lie, and right now, the AFC North is a hodgepodge of nothingness. It's an injured, battered Bengals team that might be starting to come around based on what we saw from Burrow and Chase yesterday. It's a Steelers team that has zigged and zagged its way to mediocrity, much like they have the better part of the last 3 seasons. And then you've got a Browns team that's got a good defense. We don't know what on offense, and a Ravens team that's stuck in the middle like a lot of people thought they would. The big difference between the North and where it is now versus where it was projection-wise is that it even looks worse than the South. Like, I think, Mark, a lot of people thought that the AFC North might cannibalize itself, but still get teams at least 2 or 3 into the playoffs because they're better than what you saw in the South and the bottom of the East and West. But there's no evidence of that last part.
I always like when 3 teams from a division are projected to be in the playoffs. That is so hard to have happen. It has done, but it's wishful thinking. And now you wonder if the AFC North might only get one team, the division winner, in the playoffs because everybody's congregating near 500.
Well, who was it that you were talking about that suggested that all 4 teams were going to get in from the AFC North? Kmart?
Yeah, it might have been Kmart. Yeah, which is where she should be working.
How about the offensive line? Is that where the offensive lineman should be working?
That's maybe the most disappointing part of the team, if only because it was projected to be a lot better. It was projected to be improved over last year. Isaac Seumalo, I'm seeing nothing from him on the television feed. Broderick Jones is having a bit of a rough baptism, but that was always going to happen. And I'm glad he's in there because he projects to be a lot better than Dan Moore Jr. and probably in relatively short order. Mason Cole was never going to be good enough. Chooks was never good enough. James Daniels was hurt yesterday. The offensive line just ain't very good. Nothing about these Steelers is very good except for TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. There are certain areas of the team that show flashes. Like, I thought the inside backers had a real good second half yesterday.
I'd agree with that, yeah.
On the stretch of the game. They made some plays. Even Mick is kind of struggling because I think he feels like he has to,
he's covering for 3 guys, his own job and usually 2 others per snap.
Right. Protect against the run. Spy on Lamar yesterday. And since he's trying to do everything, he's not doing much of anything. But he's a real good player, obviously. But I just don't see too many strengths. Now, I'll tell you one guy who, to me especially, has proven himself in his absence is Deontay Johnson. They miss Deontay Johnson something fierce.
They do, because they're so thin at wide receiver. That's the one area that they really couldn't bolster this offseason. They tried their best with Allen Robinson, but I think they're finding out that Allen Robinson is more of a 4 than a 3.
Yeah, he's a scrub. And Pickens has played well. Obviously, it was great yesterday. But, boy, when your receiving strategy, your passing strategy, rather, is to throw the ball toward Pickens and hope he makes a play, that says a lot about him, but it says a lot about what else you got or don't got.
Well, especially, Mark, because, this was a week where George Pickens was open really when he wasn't open. Like that sort of narrative that we always hear about him. It was the case. And if Pickett continues to pump the ball in that direction, even on plays when he's not open, eventually 1 or 2 of them are going to get picked. It didn't happen yesterday. He was real good with his ball placement to George Pickens, put it in spots where only Pickens could get it, tight windows and so forth. But that's not always going to be the case. That's really hard to do, especially when, like you said, while Johnson is out or maybe not 100% when he comes back, Pickens is getting doubled all the time.
You know what Pickens is real good at, too? And he better be, because, like you said, he's getting doubled. He's real good at using his body to shield defenders off the ball. He's not just reaching for the ball with his hands. He's using his whole body to make a play.
I want to go back to your point about people dwelling on Pickett checking to the play and the bomb to Pickens. Broderick Jones, after the game, I asked him about nothing about the call. I just said, hey, it looked like the coverage held up better in some situations in the second half when Pickett was getting the ball to Pickens. And he said Cole and Pickett were really good at checking into the right protection at the line of scrimmage. And I said, do they do that on that? And I asked him particularly about that play. And he said they checked really well, but we didn't do it as much as we thought. So there was more in the bag for them to do when they were in zero coverage, but they did it in zero coverage on that play. But I don't think it was like an audible per se. I think Jalen Warren used the word audible in his response, and that got everybody, talking. And like you said, fanning the flames that Canada had nothing to do with it. But it was a check. Like, you went to the line and said, okay, you're in this play, but if it's zero coverage, you can go into this. And that's what they did.
Yeah, well, again, it's all part of the sociopathic need for the morons out there to distance anything good from Canada. Tim, it is at and I don't use that word lightly, it's a sociopathic level. Everyone has decided that he is a bad man who hurts the Steelers, and they have to get rid of him, and every single thing that goes bad is due to him. Everything that goes good is because of something else, and specifically not him. It is a pathetic fan base in that regard right now. They've decided, like I said, they've decided bad man hurts Steelers, must go. And Tim, I hope he does go. And he would have gone had they lost yesterday. But when he does go, people are going to find out he's not the problem.
Yeah, I think we've seen that at times with the Penguins when they've had their whipping boys for the fans to go after.
Nothing like this. Nothing like this.
This is that on steroids.
Canada is numero uno whipping boy for any team all time in this town.
Well, part of it is too, Mark, is that the national media has bought in. And they've bought in by way of deflecting.
Right, by deflecting from Tomlin. Right, you beat me to it.
Yeah, well, I can't remember if you and
I
talked.
wonder why that could be.
Well, I wonder why. I can't remember if you and I talked about this or not here, but somewhere along the way it's been discussed, and I think it's right, that last week you started to see criticism of Tomlin coming out of the Houston game. But the criticism of Tomlin that you saw was his biggest fault is his loyalty. He's too loyal to Matt Canada. So even by way of criticizing Tomlin, you're praising him for a positive human trait. And you're still making Canada the reason for it. And that's the closest the national media could ever come to blaming Tomlin.
Honestly, Tim, stuff like we're talking about now is why I am absolutely weary of talking about the Steelers, why I'm just tired of it. We can't have a discussion about what's really going on with the Steelers. We can't do it. It is not permitted by the dopes out there.
We were
and the dopes on TV.
As I was getting logged in here, I was listening to our colleagues over at iHeart on DVE, and they were talking about how it feels like they are still in the stages right now offensively of where this team was when it came out of the bye last season. And I think that's a pretty good analogy. Like when they just started to come out of the bye, they were creeping to wins like 13-10 and 16-13. That's probably true. But you know what? Then they've got to default back to that and run the ball effectively then and take minimal plays.
Well, now I'm confused. Was that said by way of optimism that this team's about to come out of the bye and burst into prominence?
No, it was said by way of criticism. It was said by way of –
because it should be.
You know, and my response to that is that you have to admit that's where you are, but part of getting out of that is running the ball effectively, and this offensive line can't do that. Like, I'll be real interested to see, Mark, coming out of the bye, they've got the Rams, right? The Rams have Aaron Donald, and the built-in excuse is going to be Aaron Donald's going to wreck the game. Aaron Donald just played against the Eagles. I don't know if he played the whole game or is playing hurt or compromised, but he had one solo tackle. So, like, the Eagles' offensive line that exists right now took care of business there. The Steelers allegedly got so much better with their offensive line because they got a bunch of ex-Eagles in Herbig and Siamalu. And if those guys are still playing, then they need to win that battle along the line of scrimmage then.
Well, they got the ones the Eagles were willing to let go.
There you go. There you go. But we treated it like they signed, you know, Mark Stepnoski and Eric Williams or something like that, which, you know, they're rebuilding the Cowboys line of the 1990s, and that was never going to be the case.
It's not a good football team. The Steelers aren't a good football team, but nobody wants to hear that, which is why on my show today, Tim, I have Riley Smith, Sidney Crosby, and Phil Bork as guests.
Well, let's get to hockey then, since the season starts tomorrow against the Blackhawks. Always interested in the season opener regardless, but having the Connor Bedard storyline debuting here in Pittsburgh, that's a nice little ad.
Yeah, except it's such a well-kept secret. I mean, we haven't even hyped it locally enough, have we?
No, because it's the middle of Steelers season. There's usually this creep-in thing.
Well, I'm talking about the Penguins even haven't. I haven't seen one you should have ads for the Penguins. Maybe it's sold out anyway. But the ad should have Crosby's face and Bedard's face. All that the Penguins are doing should have those two names. You know why they don't?
I know what you're going to say, because of Malkin?
Because you can't let Gino feel left out, not even for a second.
Can you include him in the commercials?
No, because in this context, he just doesn't matter.
How much is he going to matter this year? What are you expecting out of him this year?
Oh, I think he'll have a good year. I mean, I don't have a problem with him being on the team, except I would have traded him in 2018, but they made their decision. I understand it. I'm not 1,000,000% against it. They wanted to keep the gang together, and they will live with the good and bad of that. But they made a mistake when they got Sin Gino in presenting them as equals, and it prevents them from getting enough out of Sid in terms of using his presence to hype a game like tomorrow night.
Is the bottom six that much better, or is there a Steelers offensive line analogy here?
It's better. I don't know how much better. I worry about Eller at 34 handling third-line minutes.
Mm-hmm.
He reminds me more of Matt Cullen, who was a real good fourth-liner and could jump up occasionally, but handling third-line minutes night in and night out. Now, I have heard that they plan to use the third and fourth lines like, you know, 2 third lines, like equal minutes. And that's okay if your fourth line's good enough. What I'm waiting to see is how Drew O'Connor does, because he had a real good preseason. Then again, so did Redeems the Horn, and they cut him.
Right, yeah. I thought O'Connor was particularly good. I saw that last preseason game against Buffalo, and he flashed a couple times there. But is he one of these guys, Mark, who has to play with the upper-end guys to get the most out of them? Or is he going to be able to thrive, do you think, in a third or fourth line role?
Well, if you're asking me what I would do, I'd have him as my third line center, and I'd move Eller to wing.
Okay.
O'Connor always plays better at center, but they're not going to do that. If he could get 15 goals, that would be great. That would help a lot. They need some third liner to get 15, 20 goals.
Well, Riley Smith would be a nice fit for that, but he's going to be elevated to the second line and play with Gino for most of the year, right? That's the thinking?
Well, that's okay. He's a top 6 level guy. He was in Vegas, although like since the franchise's inception, they had four second lines.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. How do you feel about the bottom pair on defense, or does it not matter because you're going to get 50 minutes from the Letang and Carlson pairs?
I think most nights it won't matter, but some nights it will. I worry about, do they have enough penalty killers among the defensemen, because they really don't. I guess you're going to use Ruido to kill penalties, to which I say, yikes.
Are they strong enough in front of the net on the blue line or no?
Well, you see, that's another thing I always debate on my show. Everybody wants them to knock heads in front of the net and clear people out. That's not how the game is anymore. The game now is about the first defenseman goes to the puck. The second defenseman, if the opportunity arises, supports him on the puck. That's even both behind the goal line. And then the center picks up the slot. The goal is to keep the puck from getting to the slot, not battering the people they're trying to get it to. Because whenever people call my show to complain, my God, they had both defensemen behind the goal line. That's what they want. That's how the game is now. That's how most coaches prefer. But like as far as like, it's not the time of hockey's evolution for Hal Gill anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's, maybe hockey fans need to come along like football fans and get used to seeing the shotgun on first and second down.
Hockey fans in this town romanticize toughness, even though the Penguins have been anything but a tough team since Battleship Kelly left town. Same with football fans. Win the game in the trenches, even though that's not the way football is anymore. But, whatever. People have their delusions, and they're going to stick to them, not least in this town.
Mark, Phil Jurkovec got moved to tight end. They got a new quarterback now, and they open up against Louisville, who just beat up Notre Dame. Wonder how that's going to go on Saturday.
Pretty much like we think it will. I mean, the Jurkovec thing, I don't get why you're super serving a guy who didn't come to Pitt originally like he probably should have. And now he's here, and let's make sure Phil has a role. He should go home and get on with his life's work, which is probably pickleball.
Well, with the way things looked last week, or Sunday, I should say, after Pat Freiermuth didn't play with the injury, they could use a tight end. Maybe he can just go. He's what? He's older than Kenny Pickett at this point, isn't he? Why don't you just join the Steelers and be a third?
It's just dumb. It's just dumb. It's grandstanding. It's an attempt to get people to talk about something other than them being a lousy football team. They don't know Phil Jurkovec anything. He's not going to be a tight end in the NFL. He's just not. He's just done. He should be the backup quarterback. He had a great future when he was at Pine Richmond, or so we thought, and he failed. Lots of people fail. But not everybody gets propped up incessantly like this schmuck.
All right, let's get to some posts here. This comes from Richard, who says, another false dawn win that placates the fan base and keeps the status quo going, meaning another likely 9-8 season that mediocre Mike never had a losing season and keep that streak going.
I can't see the comments.
Yeah, it's not coming up, but I went to the bottom down because mine actually...
Oh, there it is. Okay, go.
Yeah, mine rolled all the way to the bottom down. Yeah, that's probably what it's going to be now. I mean, the hopes of...
And we will celebrate 9-8.
There'll be another year where Mike kept the ship in an even keel.
Oh, my God, Tim. And it'll, like with Ryan Clark and them, this is why he's the gold standard of coaching. A Tomlin team never gives up. And it'll be made to look like he had nothing to work with, and he was the reason they overachieved.
Richard adds, Crosby versus Bedard should be a much bigger deal, except for the NHL only caring about original six matchups.
That's true, but again, it's local too. I've not heard anybody promote this game locally. The Penguins, nobody, is Crosby versus Bedard, and that's Cosagino.
Durf says, will the local Pickett lovers be swooning over his last drive?
Yes.
It will over the last throw, that's for sure. Dan says, Mark, who do you think could be a surprise team and make a jump in the Eastern and Western conferences?
I think the Penguins could finish second in the division. That's, probably me wishful thinking, but I think it's possible. I mean, Buffalo's the team everybody's saying in the East, right?
Yeah, they're one of those where it's almost expected, even though people are calling them a surprise because they didn't make it last year.
Who are they all saying? Buffalo, Ottawa, and Detroit could all jump, right?
That was the talk coming out of last season, yes.
Tim, why can't I indulge my penchant for pessimism and talk about the teams I think are going to take a giant dump? For example,
go ahead, take one, because you said the Rangers, right?
Well, no, I think they'll fall a little. I think the Penguins could jump over them. I think the Bruins don't make the playoffs.
Bruins don't make the playoffs?
From the all-time points record, they're not making the playoffs.
I saw one here that came in. I wanted to find this. This comes from Ron. Did you see Marc-Andre Fleury trip up the new pretty boy Bedard in the shootout?
Yeah, well, people are making a big deal out of that. It was just Fleury being playful.
Yeah, I mean, he was going down anyway.
In the shootout.
Yeah, Bedard kind of screwed up in the shootout. He was going down, and Fleury sort of tripped him on the way by. But Let's save it with the pretty boy narrative. Remember how we all bristled at that when Crosby came to town?
No, Bedard can play.
Yeah, and he's got a great shot from what I understand too. So
Bedard can play. Did you see when have you seen, I don't know if it aired yet, I saw a snippet, Crosby and Bedard talking.
I haven't heard it with the volume up. I keep seeing it with the volume down, but I know what you're talking about.
David Beckham interviewing David Beckham. Like these two well-groomed, you know what I mean? It's fun.
Clean cut, except now Sid's getting all salt and peppery. I think they were going for that in that shot, They wanted to show like he's aging, Connor Bedard's the young face, that sort of thing.
I told him to diet, Tim. I'll tell him again today on the show.
Brian says the Ravens gifted that game to the Steelers. Fraudulent 3-2. Do they still buy their own BS? Fans bragging about first place in Week 5 is like when they celebrated that paper-thin 11-0
start. Now, hold on. How could you not celebrate an 11-0 start?
Yeah, I mean, I
said that it was the worst 11-0 team in history, and that turned out to be true. But that 11-0 is a little better than this 3-2. I mean, they're minus 31 point differential.
Well, a couple things about the Ravens. You talked about the drops and the guy falling down in the secondary when he was wide open. What about that play where they decided to try to draw the Steelers off sides or milk the clock at the line and then ended up screwing it up and they missed the opportunity to kick a field goal?
Well, that just obscures the main issue. That's excuse making, which they just should have lined up for a field goal.
Just walk to the sideline and call it a timeout.
They should have they just should have kicked the field goal. Okay, they shouldn't have bothered with this gamesmanship. They should have said, okay, this team we're playing can't score at all. 3 points is more valuable currency against them than it is most teams. Just line up and kick the field goal.
Alex says, I'm worried about the Pens. No real changes in the top 6. Bottom 6 is a bunch of scrubs who can't play top.
Well, Riley Smith is a real change in the top 6. I mean, if you want to say it's a downgrade from Jason Zucker, I guess you can. Yeah, the bottom 6 on most teams is a bunch of scrubs who can't play top.
Would you
it's
call
a 32-team league? The days of having Joe Mullen and Yarmir Yager on your third line are long since over.
Yeah, Brian Trottier is your third line center. By the way, what'd you think of him in the studio?
He was fine. I think they have a good studio crew. I still would have narrowed it down. I wouldn't have to rotate and cast, but that's what they want. I think my buddy Matt Bartkowski will do a real good job.
They decided to keep Potash in the mix, but they had him not be the rinkside guy, which is where I thought he excelled and made a name for himself. That was the strange move.
I thought he was real strong in the studio, though.
You think he's strong? All right. Over the weekend, I didn't watch that much in the preceseason. I saw one game.
Well, they were always going to get a woman involved somewhere, right? And Haley Hunter's real good. And as an interviewer, that's probably the best place for her. And they moved Potash to suit that. I got to be honest. I think the time had come and gone, not for Potash as an interviewer, but like the Star Wars costume, the theme nights. I mean, I had one player say to me one year and said, yeah, we're getting beat 4-0 intermission. I have to get interviewed by Han Solo. It wasn't good anymore. That's no knock on Dan. It's just, some things have a shelf life.
Yeah, that's what he was fed to do. That's what he was kind of instructed to do. I think it was great for pregame, but once the game started, you got to be prepared for them getting their doors blown off.
Well, don't forget, a lot of Dan's reputation, and I mean that in a very positive way, was built when they were a juggernaut. And you had guys like him and Dupuis doing, comedy at the end of the bit. Thanks, Dan. Like all that stuff.
And Talbot.
And it just, it's not that way anymore.
I think Army's good on color.
Yeah, I think that him and Josh talked a little too much, especially Josh. Josh, because he's just doing radio. But that'll be good. They'll come good. They're both excellent.
Eric says some local media dope said that Pickett to Pickens is the new Montana to Rice.
Yeah, whatever.
If Montana to Rice were playing yesterday, it would have been 21-3 Steelers at the end of the first quarter.
One thing, Tim, among the radio guys, where it should be evident that I distinguish myself, is that all I do is tell the truth. Like saying Pickett to Pickens is the new Montana to Rice, that guy doesn't believe that for a second. That is formulaic, designed to rally the dopes, and if you don't see right through it, I do.
Josh says the OC isn't on the field and throwing the ball off target or running around the second the pocket gets a little bit tight. I get what he's saying. He's
right. And that, by the way, that's Pickett's biggest problem. He has terrible feel for the pocket. Just terrible.
And when he stands in there, on the odd times when he stands in there, he's pretty good. I mean, like, the biggest highlights we can think of Pickett so far in his career are him standing in and delivering to Najee, standing in and delivering to Pickens in the Raider game yesterday. Like, the pass to Calvin Austin against the Raiders. Like, he does it well when he decides to do it, but he is so quick to leave, and as our colleague Matt Williamson often says, invites chaos, which I think is a fun way to describe it.
Well, you know what Kenny Pickett really is and will wind up being is a good backup.
Yeah, because he's smart and knows the system. And, kind of like, and I've drawn the analogy many times, like Matt Hasselbeck.
In short doses, I think he'll be efficient. But, like, people don't want to accept that 18 games isn't a small sample anymore. Tim, he has yet to play one great game. His passer rating has been over 90 twice. Like, including not yesterday.
I have no faith that they're going to come out of the bye and fix anything or change anything. They've got a stretch of games coming up where they've got 4 pretty mediocre teams before they play the Browns again the Sunday before Thanksgiving. You look at it and you say they should absolutely be 3-1 and no worse. But then you think back to the Houston game.
I disagree.
You look back to the Houston game, you're saying they're probably lucky to be 2-2.
Who are they playing? The Rams, then Jacksonville.
Rams,
then who?
Jacksonville, Titans, Packers.
Yeah, they'll go 2-2, maybe. And if you made me bet, if there was some bet at Bet Rivers where I could bet 3-1 or 1-3, I'd bet 1-3. They're more likely to go 1-3 than 3-1.
How was Queen, Mark? And perhaps more importantly, how did you survive Baltimore?
Every time, like, somebody flagged me down, like at a red light, I just bought crack. I didn't smoke it, but it seemed the easiest way to avoid trouble.
Yes, right. Just make sure, just keep the economy going. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. See, it's a shame Baltimore is that way too, and it really is, except right in the waterfront. And I was close to the waterfront and still wasn't good. I was right next to the arena, which is right next to M&T Bank, which is right next to Camden Yards. And I guess they told me on game days, and even on concert nights, it's okay. But just like, during the day or in the evening when there's nothing going on, it kind of feels and looks bad, but I drove to Jimmy's famous seafood, which is great. I love that place. Even that's not in the best neighborhood, but it was good. So it was all right. I mean, I prefer trips elsewhere, but then again, my next concert trip's New York at the Garden, and I don't go out of a block radius there either.
Well, you can, depending on if you take a cab or you take the subway or whatever, you can go to whatever part of New York, and it's, it's great here. It's not so great here. It's better there. It's not so good here. Like, New York is, blocks and blocks and miles of that.
Yeah. But the point is, in today's America, inner cities aren't great.
No.
In general, including Pittsburgh.
What was the best Queen song you saw? You saw them 2 nights, right?
Yeah, they did the exact same set list both nights, which kind of surprised me. Most groups, when they play in the same city 2 nights in a row, they vary the set list slightly for those who, were there both nights. But even like one thing I love to notice stuff like this. Even like Adam Lambert's movement and placement on the stage was exactly the same for every song.
So they're not even so much doing a concert as they are doing a Broadway play almost.
Oh, no, it's a concert, but they're like, no, it's that way with most guys, Tim. With most groups, they just do the same thing every night. Like, even when Brian May sings "Love of My Life" with just his acoustic guitar, right? And everybody pulls out the iPhones, and he made the same joke both nights. Or those candles, they were candles back in my day, or cigarette lighters. But it was really good. I don't find that stuff bad. I just find it curious.
Mark Madden is up at 3 o'clock today on 105.9 The X. Be listening to his show. We will still do Madden Benz Unfiltered next week, even though there's no Steelers game. But you know what? We'll have, Mark, 2 games or 3 games for the Penguins to talk about by then? We'll have a couple Penguin games.
Tuesday, Friday, Saturday.
Tuesday, Friday, Saturday. So we'll have 3 Penguin games to talk about for Madden Benz Unfiltered. So hockey fans, Unfiltered will be undeniably for you next week, as will Mark's show, as will Breakfast with Benz a lot over the course of the next couple days. This is Madden Benz Unfiltered.